Coming up, before all the excitement of the by-elections, earlier this week, Conservative MP Peter Bone was found to have engaged in sexual harassment and bullying behaviour by the Commons Watchdog, the non-political independent expert panel, the IEP. Of course, ERG member and grand wizard of the Brexit Cult, Peter Bone, joins the perhaps more famous Priti Patel, Gavin Williamson and Dominic Raab on a long list of Tory parliamentarians found guilty of either bullying or sexually inappropriate behaviour, and often both, in successive Tory governments since 2010. 24 MPs have been suspended from the current parliament, and they're overwhelmingly Tories. But let's take a closer look at the Peter Bone scandal and how his case is just the latest instance of a tide of sordid abuses of power by Tory MPs. Stay tuned. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, subscribe, and above all, share a link to this video with your social media contacts. For the last 10 years, and without public knowledge, hard-right Tory MP Peter Bone has been under investigation by various organisations over accusations made by a former staff member after they quit their job in his office in 2013. During that time, Bone has been a figurehead of the Eurosceptic right of the Tory party. In other words, Bone was under investigation even during the period when he was intensely campaigning for a leave vote in the run-up to the advisory referendum on EU membership. The unnamed employee provided evidence that during 2012 and 13, Bone frequently shouted at him and called him thick. The report also stated that Bone repeatedly struck his staff member on the back, shoulders and back of the head, saying at one point he'd done so because you're having a thick day and I thought that would help. On at least 6 occasions, Bone demanded a neck and shoulder massage with nobody else in the office and the door closed. Once, on a work trip to Madrid, Bone booked a twin room for the pair and complained when the employee tried to pull the twin beds apart. Bone then summoned the complainant into the bathroom to fix a broken shower and then dropped his towel and shoved his genitals close to the employee's face. The IEP found these allegations credible, finding that Bone's denials that the events ever took place jarred with detailed notes taken by the complainant and Bone's own admission that he could not remember minute details of the events in question. The report noted this was a deliberate and conscious abuse of power using a sexual mechanism, indecent exposure. The IEP was considering the case in the context of the complaint having first been made directly to the Conservative Party in 2017. But after 5 years with no obvious progress as the process was stalled, the employee decided to withdraw that complaint and pursue action instead via Parliament's independent complaints and grievance scheme, which has now this week led to the recommendation that Bone be suspended from the Commons for 6 weeks. Assuming that the recommendation is upheld by the House of Commons, this will likely trigger a recall petition by Bone's constituents. So that means yet another difficult by-election for the Tories. With the 2 losses of safe seats this week, it seems that rather than hold a general election, Rishi Sunak is determined to lose power on a seat-by-seat basis. Because although Peter Bone is the latest in a long line of Tory parliamentary sexual predators and bullies, he won't be the last, as this behaviour continues to be swept under the carpet by the Conservative Party, in a complete contrast to the Labour Party. Regular viewers of this channel will note that I'm not exactly a fully paid up member of the Keir Starmer fan club, but it has to be said, when Labour MP Chris Matheson was found to have made unwanted and unwelcome sexual advances towards a junior member of staff last year, Starmer withdrew the whip and threw him out of the party immediately. Compare and contrast that to the 10-year duration of the process to bring Peter Bone to account, where the whip was only withdrawn this week. During that time, Bone was even appointed as Deputy Leader of the House of Commons by Boris Johnson, who knew full well of the investigation into Bone. As Lib Dem Chief Whip Wendy Chamberlain said, "This is too little too late. It shouldn't have taken this long for Sunak to act." Serious questions remain over Conservative Central HQ's handling of this case and what successive Prime Ministers knew about Peter Bone's conduct. This scandal illustrates yet again that the Conservative Party cannot govern itself, let alone the country. And she has a point. Peterbone comes hot on the heels of the disgraced former government whip, Chris Pincher, who was suspended for 8 weeks after being found to have drunkenly groped 2 men at a private members' club last year. The sanction was imposed by the Standards Committee for completely inappropriate behaviour and abuse of power. The row over Pincher's behaviour posed uncomfortable questions for Boris Johnson, as he'd initially denied any prior knowledge about complaints against Pincher when he was appointed, later being forced to admit that was untrue and that he'd indeed been telling porkies. So out of character for Johnson, I know. At the subsequent by-election in Pincher's former seat held just this week, the electorate have delivered their verdict, with polling guru Professor John Curtis opining that no government has lost a seat as safe as Tamworth. And alongside Bone and Pincher, joining them in the gallery of Tory parliamentarians abusing power, we have Dominic Raab, who resigned as Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary after an independent inquiry found he had abused his power by intimidating and undermining his staff. Raab has said he will stand down as an MP at the next election. Good riddance. Then there was Priti Patel, the worst Home Secretary ever, until Suella Braverman came along and said, "Hold my beer." The disgraced Patel was found to have broken the ministerial code once again in 2020 by bullying staff while Home Secretary. Instances of shouting and swearing and even book throwing were uncovered by the then Prime Minister's ethics advisor. And let's not forget Minister Gavin Williamson, who was accused of telling a senior civil servant to slit your throat and jump out of a window when he was Defence Secretary. He didn't fess up to wrongdoing, but said he was standing down to avoid being a distraction. So let's move on to some of the more sordid examples of this institutionalised Tory malaise of abuse of power and sexually predatory behaviour. A good example is Imran Ahmed Khan, the Tory MP for Wakefield, until he was found guilty last year of the sexual assault of a 15-year-old boy and sentenced to 18 months in prison. He was only expelled from the party after his conviction. Then there's Rob Roberts, MP for Delyn, who was suspended from the party for 12 weeks in June 2020 after an independent report found that he'd made repeated and unwanted sexual advances towards a member of his staff, breaching Parliament's sexual misconduct policy. He was allowed to return as a member of the Conservative Party in October 2021 and still sits to this day as an independent MP. David Warburton was the Tory MP for Somerton and Frome and was suspended from the party after a series of allegations from 3 different women relating to sexual harassment and cocaine use. Warburton allegedly asked for cocaine to be bought, and one of the complainants said he got into bed with her naked and then ground against her and groped her breasts after she stated repeatedly she did not want sex with him. He eventually resigned after a Nadine Dorris-like year of absence from the Commons, and the subsequent by-election was lost to the Lib Dems spectacularly. Then there was Andrew Griffiths, the MP for Burton and a Conservative minister in 2018. He was found to have sent over 2,000 sexually explicit text messages to 2 of his female constituents. It was concluded in a court of law by Judge Williscroft that Griffiths had pressured his wife, Kate, also a Conservative MP, into engaging in sexual activity and used coercive and controlling behaviour towards her. The Tory party only got rid of him through the local party deselecting him for the 2019 election. Next up, Neil Parish, the tractor porn MP for Tiverton, who was forced to resign after twice watching dominatrix porn while in the House of Commons, in full view of both male and female colleagues. That led to yet another by-election thumping for the Tories at the hands of the Lib Dems. Next up, Conor Burns, MP for Bournemouth West, the one who claimed that Boris Johnson had been ambushed with a cake during Partygate, and who was fired from his ministerial role last year after he was found to have touched a man's thigh without permission at the Tory conference. He was somehow cleared of misconduct, and the odious Conor Burns, with a history that includes intimidation of a member of the public and racist remarks about the travelling community, sits as a Tory MP to this very day. Next, Stephen Crabb, Tory MP for Preseli, who was found in 2017 to have sent unwanted, sexually explicit text messages to a female candidate he'd interviewed for a job in his own office, forcing him to resign his position at the Department for Work and Pensions. There had been earlier allegations of him sending suggestive text messages, with the Conservative Party investigating panel determining that his behaviour had been inappropriate but did not constitute harassment. Can you see a pattern arising here? Next up is yet another Tory MP who has managed to remain anonymous, but is accused of drugging and assaulting colleagues, including allegations of licking the nipples of a fellow Tory MP that he had drugged up. The unnamed MP has not been suspended by the party while detectives continue their probe. Then there's Mark Menzies, MP for Fylde in Lancashire, who in 2014 had to resign as a parliamentary private secretary after allegations surfaced that he paid a Brazilian male escort in the UK illegally for sex and drugs. Plus, Mark Garnier, Tory MP for Wyre Forest. He referred to his secretary as sugar tits and sent her out to buy 2 vibrators from a sex shop while he waited outside. The Cabinet Office investigated, but as the incidents happened before he became a minister, no action was taken. He was dismissed as a minister in a reshuffle in 2018, but remains to this day as a sitting Tory MP. Next up, James Grundy, Tory MP for Lee. In 2020, a video recording obtained by LBC shows Grundy publicly exposing his genitals in front of a woman at an event in the Ram's Head Inn in Loughton in 2007. Next up, Lord Remy Ranger. This is a Tory life peer who was caught up in the Cash for Honours scheme and later found guilty by an employment tribunal of victimising and harassing a female employee after she'd raised a sexual harassment complaint against another member of staff. Last year, another complaint was lodged against him by journalist Poona Joshi, who described verbal abuse, threats of legal action, and a series of derogatory tweets about her. She described Ranger's behaviour as unethical and unhinged, but he was not found to be in breach of the House of Lords Code of Conduct. Next, Nigel Evans, Tory MP for Ribble Valley, who was acquitted of rape in the courts, but during the trial it came to light that in 2003 it was claimed that Evans indecently assaulted 2 men in their 20s when he approached them in public places while drunk and put his hand down their trousers, one in a Soho bar and the other at a hotel during the 2003 Tory party conference. His barrister, Peter Wright QC, speaking for Evans, said, "We say these earlier alleged incidents did not amount to much then and do not do so now. They showed a drunken over-familiarity, not what the prosecution thesis alleges, the actions of a powerful, career-making and breaking politician abusing his position. They are a high watermark of over-friendly, inappropriate behaviour by a drunken man, rather than the ingredients of an indecent assault." Okay. Then there's Damien Green, Tory MP for Ashford, who was forced to resign his cabinet position in 2017 after he was investigated for sexually harassing a woman and watching pornography on his work computer in Westminster. He was found to have broken the ministerial code. Next up, Daniel Kaczynski, the particularly toxic culture warrior Tory MP, who was found to have bullied parliamentary staff and made to issue an apology in the House of Commons in 2017. He later confessed the apology wasn't genuine, he just made it to avoid being suspended. But he was eventually suspended from the Commons, although he still sits as a Tory MP to this day. And now, criminality, sexual misconduct and conspiring to pervert the course of justice all wrapped up in one case. Charlie Elphicke, Tory MP for Dover, was found guilty in 2020 of 3 counts of sexual assault and sentenced to prison for 2 years. He was replaced as MP for Dover by his wife, Natalie Elphicke, the Nigel Farage wannabe often seen patrolling the Kent coastline with her Fisher-Price binoculars, and who was subsequently suspended for 1 day after she was found to have attempted to influence the outcome of her husband's sexual assault court case. In August 2020, another unnamed Tory MP and ex-minister was arrested on suspicion of rape, but has to date never been charged. The woman he assaulted on the parliamentary estate alleges that the MP forced her to have sex and left her so traumatised that she had to go to hospital for treatment. Open Democracy are reporting that this same MP has been given permission to run for re-election by his local Tory party. The MP, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was arrested in May 2022 on a suspicion of indecent assault, sexual assault, rape and other related charges. He's been bailed 4 times since his arrest, and he's been banned from entering the Westminster estate by the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle. When approached by Open Democracy, the Conservative Party declined to comment. After the latest by-election results, they have too much else on their mind.